Let me say this as clearly as possible. If your groceries are more expensive, your energy bills keep rising, housing feels impossible, and you're being told, oh, this is all necessary, that's not bad luck. That's policy. And tonight, I'm going to show you where it's really coming from. So stay tuned. Let me start with a simple question. If a policy makes life more expensive, reduces opportunity, weakens domestic industries, and shrinks the middle class, and yet the people in power keep doubling down on it, at what point do we stop calling that a failure? Because Canadians are being told over and over again that higher prices, lower living standards, and fewer opportunities are just the unavoidable cost of progress. But what if these outcomes aren't accidents? What if they're logical results of an ideology that was never designed around the everyday Canadians in the first place? Like, and before we go any further, let me just be clear about something. This isn't me trying to fearmonger or anything like that. It's about me validating ideas that I'm sure most of you have already felt, or maybe you feel. Maybe something you haven't fully put into words yet, or maybe something that you've questioned at one time or another. The sense that what's happening around us doesn't feel accidental anymore, that the same policies keep showing up no matter who's in power, and that regular Canadians keep being told the struggle is normal, even necessary, while life keeps getting harder. This video is about connecting those dots. Today, we're going to be talking about the World Economic Forum, the government philosophy it promotes, and how that philosophy helped hollow out the United Kingdom, and why Mark Carney appears to be steering Canada down the same road. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Logan. This channel is about cutting through political branding and asking one simple question. Is this making life better for Canadians or not? Because intentions don't pay our grocery bill. Outcomes do. Now, let's talk about the World Economic Forum. And no, before the comments start warming up, this isn't a secret society. There's no underground volcano base, and nobody's wearing any matching capes. The WEF is actually more boring than that, and way more influential. The WEF is not a government, it is not elected, and it doesn't answer to voters. It's a private organization that brings together politicians, central bankers, corporations, executives, NGOs, and activists to coordinate global political direction and policy direction. And here are the key things to understand. The WEF does not believe nation states should be the main decision maker anymore. They believe they believe that global problems require global governance, even if that overrides national priorities, local institutions, or democratic resistance. That's not speculation. That's their stated worldview. They openly promote centralized economic planning, climate-first financial restructuring, stakeholder capitalism instead of free markets, and the idea that hardship is even an acceptable, even necessary tool for transformation, which sounds noble until you realize who's actually absorbing that hardship. Spoiler alert, it's not the people flying private jets to Davos. Now let's talk about Mark Carney, because this is where things actually start being abstract. Carney isn't just adjacent to this worldview, he believes it wholeheartedly. And the clearest evidence of that is in his own book, Values. In Values, Carney argues that modern capitalism is morally flawed, that markets, left alone, don't produce good outcomes, that profits must be subordinated to social objectives, and that governments, financial institutions must actively guide capital, not just let it flow. That's not a hit piece. That's the thesis. In plain English, markets can't be trusted. People need to be nudged or forced into better behavior. And resistance isn't disagreement, it's just ignorance. Which is always a comforting thing to hear from someone who never had to budget groceries before, right? Carney frames this as responsibility. But responsibility without consent isn't leadership, it's management. And when governments start managing people instead of representing them, democracy becomes performative. You still vote, you still debate, but the direction never changes. Funny how that works, huh? Now let's talk about the United Kingdom, because this ideology has already had a test run. The UK aggressively adopted the World Economic Forum, WEF, aligned policies, thinking net zero targets without energy security, financial pressure on domestic industries, regulatory burdens stacked on fragile economic conditions. The pitch was simple: sacrifice now for a better future later. And what actually happened? Energy prices exploded, manufacturing declined, investments fled the country, the pound weakened, and the middle class collapsed faster than anyone could have expected. The wealth, the wealthy adapted, the poor absorbed the shock. Everyone in between was told just to adjust expectations. You can't make this stuff up. Nothing builds national morale quite like being told your lifestyle was unrealistic. During a critical period of that transformation, Mark Carney, our beautiful Mark Carney, was the governor of the Bank of England. Carney repeatedly argued that climate risk was a financial risk and that banks and governments should use financial pressure to force change. Let's translate that to plain English for the normal people that don't just study politics. If capital is restricted, projects don't get built. People hold money, they don't build. Jobs disappear because there's no work, essentially. Energy costs rise. Communities decline. And when people push back, they're told they don't understand the urgency. Funny how urgency always shows up after your bill goes up. Now look at Canada. Carbon taxes pushed up food prices and fuel prices. Energy projects being stalled or even worse, canceled. Housing shortages worsened by bureaucratic planning. A shrinking middle class being told, oh, this is all just part of the plan. Sound familiar? Canada is walking the same path that the UK just walked. We're only a few steps behind them. And once again, the wonderful Mark Carney is positioned as a guiding voice. What's more concerning isn't just one policy, it's the mindset behind all of them. That people must be conditioned, that resistance is just misinformation, that national interests are outdated, and that hardship is acceptable if it serves a global goal. That is not a Canadian tradition. Canada was built on abundance, on opportunity, on energy independence, on upward mobility, not managed decline. Now, before anyone rushes to the comments, this is not an argument against environmental responsibility. It's not an argument against working with other countries. It is an argument against outsourcing our future to unelected global institutions. No Canadian voted for Davos. No Canadian voted to be poorer because of abstract global targets. And no Canadian voted to be told this is as good as it gets. Yet here we are. The UK is now trying to reverse course. Canada still has time, but only if people understand what's really happening and demand accountability. Because once this ideology becomes fully embedded, it becomes self-reinforcing. Every failure justifies more control. Every hardship demands more sacrifice. Every objection becomes immoral. That is how managed decline works. So I'll leave you with this. If these policies were actually working, Canadians wouldn't be struggling even more than they were like last year. Year after year, we're struggling harder. If this worldview created prosperity, the UK wouldn't be trying to undo it right now. And if this agenda truly served the public, it wouldn't need unelected global forums to push it forward. This isn't the left versus the right. It's Canadians versus being managed. Who decides the future of this country? Voters? Or the institutions that never even face them? That's the conversation we need to have. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read all of them, by the way. If you found value here, hit like, subscribe, and check out the other videos on the channel, because the most dangerous thing in politics isn't bad policy. It's not understanding where they come from. Thanks for listening.